Monica Melpass, Philadelphia's mayor, proposes raising property taxes 6%, and the shockwaves are immediate. Let's get the inside story. Good morning. Welcome to Inside Story. I'm Monica Melpass, and let's meet our insiders this week. They are A.J. Raju, attorney. Welcome back.
Morning,
Good to have you again, sir. Ed Trzanski, foreign policy analyst. Always nice to see you, Ed. David Dix, governmental affairs. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. And we welcome a new panelist, Liz Priate-Havey. She's attorney and GOP party chair. And welcome. We're so glad to have you as well, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Mayor Kenney's proposal. Literally, City Council had an immediate reaction. So did pretty much everybody who was listening, in a good way or a bad. But his idea was raise taxes, possibly property taxes, 6%, to dig out the $1 billion school deficit that the school remains in, school system. And so, of course, that's important for our children in the schools. But almost everybody else said, wait a minute. What was your immediate reaction?
It seems like another tax on the poor. I mean, we live in the largest, poorest big city in America, and to levy a tax on real estate on an already, squeezed population on taxes, I think it was the wrong move. I heard a lot of members of council kind of speak out pretty fervently against it as soon as the budget address was over. And given the fact that we've now had a cigarette tax, a soda tax, and now a real estate tax, all coupled with AVI not just a couple years ago, I think it's really burdensome on the poor people.
It would be the 5th property tax increase in 9 years if it passes. So what was your reaction, AJ?
Well, I mean, it's not just the real estate tax. You also have the realty transfer tax will go up to 4.35 already. The highest in the country will go up to 4.35. The reduction of the wage taxes will be slowed down. That will generate around 400 or so million over the next 5 years. Look, if you're going to make a commitment to fix schools and it requires money, then you have to find the money from somewhere. And the somewhere is not just the poor, but the real estate owners, but is also 75% of it are the businesses and corporations that pay taxes. The problem is, with all of that is, I understand we have to pay the bill. We're not collecting delinquent taxes right now from folks who are, so this is a sucker tax by the corporations and the poor folks who are actually paying, but what about those who are not currently paying? What about making government more efficient? Net, this government is supposed to grow by 4 to 5%. I think we need to tighten the belt, starting with the government first, find efficiency, find job-creating policies that attract folks into the city.
And that's a longer-range fix. So the school superintendent
the long range, we've been talking about for the past 20 years. Long range can be now so that we start having immediate impact soon. Because
to their credit, the schools say they've cut everything they can possibly cut. Next time they're going to have to cut, it's going to be into the bone, right? It's going to impact the 202,000 students in a negative way, more so than it even has. Liz, where are you at on this?
Well, I don't believe that. I think that until you have meaningful reform, if you seek efficiencies, you look at the the schools are put into silos, like this union here, this union here, this union here. People don't work together. And until you actually do that and you start kind of from scratch and put the kids first, I don't think any taxes, any more money that they throw at the schools are really going to fix the problems. The schools are going to have all the same inherent problems that they have now.
And the likelihood this is going anywhere? I mean, Darrell Clark says this is aggressive. It will hurt the poor, as David mentioned.
Yes, I think aggressive is code language for we're not interested. And it may happen in some form. I think AJ's right about the non-collection of taxes. Alan Dahm, city councilman, has been very outspoken on that point. It's much more likely that they will try to do something about the 10-year tax abatement rather than punish not just the poor, but the elderly. That's right. People who are on fixed incomes, who are homeowners, who have paid time and time again.
Right.
But back to the point about the schools, it's frustrating that in every other walk of life, we look for innovation. You hear this word disruptor. We're going to change the model. We're going to find a different way to do things. And in all of that, choice is embedded within the disruption, within the implementation of new technologies, except for education.
You're not seeing enough disruption there?
No, it's the same system. You do the same thing over and over again. After a while, you're providing a new illustration of Einstein's definition of insanity. You do the same thing over and over again.
With the same outcome.
Think you're going to get a different outcome, and you don't.
But disruption has kind of been the norm with the Philadelphia School District. We had an elected school board. Now for 17 years we had a SRC. Now we're saying we're going to scrap the SRC and go back to.
So that's a change.
That's a governance issue. That's not a
governance
choice
issue. But that volatility has not allowed for the type of stability that a school district the
you know,
size of Philadelphia
can
needs.
we make a long-term macro point? We tout this region for eds and meds and arts and culture, things that were built around 200 years ago, not of our doing. Most of it, when you look at eds and meds, they're really an export business. People that graduate from Wharton, the best and the brightest, leave. They don't really come here. That's the Cuban cigar. The rest of us are Cuba. We're still driving the 1950s car. That's West Philly, that's North Philly, etc. The reason why we're still the same Cuba and then the Cuban cigar is the export is because we have the same policy again and again. Every 4 years, we have amnesia, and we get sold a promise, and then 4 years later, we forget, and then 4 years later, another new promise, and we just keep kicking the can down the road. So you have to have a long-term policy discussion about how do we become more attractive. By being the most taxed city is not the most attractive way to attract companies. To let the greatest talent coming out of Wharton and Jefferson and Penn Medicine and others leave is not the way to go. We are right now just reshuffling the decks on the Titanic. That's not the policy that we ought to be proud of.
And by the way, with Amazon looking at cities where they're going to put their headquarters, if they hear this budget address and they hear that litany of taxes, they have to wonder what's going to happen.
Well, I do applaud Mayor Kenney for taking on the big problem and saying, put it on my back, I'll be held accountable. That part I actually admire.
And taking it away from all the citizens of the rest of Pennsylvania who have been griping that their tax dollars are going, you know, from Scranton and out west are going to pay for the Philadelphia schools. Those state representatives and state senators have heard people complain for years about that. So I
that it's
agree
just
with
a bottomless pit, in their opinion.
Exactly. So I applaud the mayor for taking this on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that a mayor that's been so politically adept throughout his years as mayor and on council didn't count to 9 on this one. To have a budget address that was so drastic and not have gotten the support on council or even among the city controller was a little thick.
But David, we knew this was going to happen because the moment we said we're going to put full control of the schools back in the hands of a locally provided school board.
Sure.
You had to pay the bill.
Yeah, he's responsible.
So this is the tyranny of mathematics that's coming in. And the question is, can you grow your way? Can you grow the economy so that you get more revenue?
Yeah.
Or do you keep on taxing what you have left? And the taxation of what is left over means you're going to have less and less of it, because smart people do not go in places where they're going to be dinged with taxes every couple years.
And speaking of taxes,
poor people don't have the leverage to move. So they're stuck with this burdensome tax bill, and I think that's something that we have to keep in mind in the largest poor city in America.
Speaking of taxes, the soda tax has not produced exactly what was projected. I mean, it's close, 85% of what was the first projected revenues coming into the budget, but 1.7% is what it's providing to this $47 billion budget of $4.7 billion, and so they have lowered their expectations for next year, meaning fewer seats in pre-K, not the universal pre-K that had been hoped, fewer new schools, that kind of thing. So that's another ding, if you will, because if one area is not bringing in the revenue you hoped, you're going to have to make it up there again.
And I think it's an efficiency thing, to AJ's earlier point. We can't put a burden like this on poor people unless we're doing everything we can to modernize our efficiencies as a city. When we have a boondoggle of $50 million on the what was to be the police center, and now we said, oh no, we're going to move it to the Philadelphia Inquirer building. That's $50 million of taxpayers' dollars that are unaccounted for, that aren't added to the school district or somewhere else that could really use that money.
What about, was the soda tax worth the fight? I believe the fight's still ongoing with the beverage industry.
I don't think the soda tax has been worth the fight. And I think it's a regressive tax. I think it does disproportionately affect the poor. I also feel that there's a negative effect, which is about 1,200 jobs have been lost in Philadelphia. And these jobs are in supermarkets and places where, you know, the poor needed those jobs.
Food deserts.
Exactly.
We talk about food deserts. And if you know that somebody in the supermarket business is operating on a 1.5% to 2% margin, and then you hit them, and it's not a soda tax, it is a beverage tax.
Right.
It is
Sugary drink
wide-ranging.
tax.
Iced tea,
And if you have the
juice.
misfortune of having a store close to the city border, You have seen your customers migrate across the border because that 99-cent bottle of soda that winds up costing $3 is a budget buster.
It adds up.
That's for sure.
All right, speaking of the schools, we do have the new school board coming into play. 27 people have been given to by the nominating panel to the mayor to review, and he gets to pick the last down to 9. In the end, they will be starting in the springtime. Any sort of notations that you want to see going forward? Anybody on there that concerns you? Anybody you like?
Well, I think every constituency should be represented, and I know that the mayor is not a fan of charter schools, but 30% of the students in Philadelphia are in charter schools, so I think it behooves him to make sure that there are people on that board that represent the charter schools and the charter school interests. Not sure that's going to happen, but he should do it.
They are managing a $3 billion budget with the 202,000 students. It's a huge enterprise.
To go back to Ed's earlier point about disruptive innovation in schools, when you look at mainline schools or private schools or academically gifted schools, kids go home at night, look at Khan Academy, which is free. Any kid can get it, poor or rich. They do the lectures at home, and then when they come to classroom, it's actually homework time, and they're pure learning. When you go to typical public schools, it's exactly the opposite, as we have been doing for the past 100 years. That means they're still using the rotary phone, not the iPhone, in public schools, and we're wondering why the results are different. Disruptive innovation doesn't just mean you put chemo on a body killing both cancer and good cells. It's being smart about what the latest innovation is and to cure from the root of it. We need to change the way we teach, period, and how we look at education as a national, not just local issue. Changing from SRC to local governance doesn't solve it by itself. It really has to have a complete overhaul of our mindset on how we teach our kids.
And AJ, there are innovations going on in Philadelphia. I don't know if anybody knows about Belmont Charter School Network. It's a school started by Michael Karp. It's a school system. It has a catchment school. It has charter schools. But the whole gist of it is it's not just about educating kids. It's about breaking poverty.
That's right.
Breaking poverty in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And the Philadelphia school system should be looking at networks like that and saying, what is it that they are doing that is helping these children who had no hope before, who are now having jobs.
And that includes the archdiocesan system, which has been an outstanding performer for decades in this town, continues to serve large segments of the population across all income levels. And the idea that they're not embraced as a partner, but instead treated as a competitor, it just means we wind up spending more money to get less favorable results.
And they are not treated as partners. There are roadblocks put in front of these people who are trying to do good in these poor communities, and that should stop.
All right, Philadelphia's newest district attorney, Larry Krasner, has decided to drop cash bail as he promised one of his campaign planks, and that is helping some people who obviously can't pay the money to get out of jail for small crimes anyway, allegations of small crimes. Do you think in the end that this was the right move? He did say that that's going to be one of his main ideas coming in.
Monica, it's going to depend on what happens to quality of life in communities that are affected by crime. And we're going to need some time just to see how all this plays out. The critics suggest, and I think with some validity, that this will not work out well. But again, he won the election. He promised to do this.
But our jails are overcrowded.
No, but
we
it's
can't
not-
lock everybody up just because of
the idea
a
that
small...
someone would sit in jail simply because they don't have money is erroneous. And anyone who has had to have the experience of being charged with a crime and sitting in jail and being in jail only for the mere fact that you cannot pay the bail would feel validated by the district attorney's move.
I agree with that. And let me look. Will there be consequences? Maybe for others, but cash bail criminalizes poverty. And when you cannot pay, as David just mentioned, cash bail, when I can pay but they cannot pay, there are unintended consequences from that too. Now you're away from the family, you can't take care of the family, your job is not disrupted. When you're desperate at that moment, you double down on more desperate things. It only leads to more problems. You have to have a fair system. Presumption of innocence and due process are both things that everybody's entitled to. It's not just for the rich, but it should be an even-handed system, not a system that criminalizes poverty. And I agree wholeheartedly with that comment.
And when the district attorney's role is to apply justice more fairly, I think this is a step in the right direction.
But there will be consequences for sure.
You can't have everything perfectly all at the same moment. So do you think this is a step in the right direction, Liz?
I'm not sure. I certainly am concerned about the fact that this does hurt the poor, that they don't have the ability to pay for the bail. But I am concerned that certain people will be let out that shouldn't be let out, and that probably will happen. And then that, but we have to wait and see.
We shall see.
All right, we're going to take a break. Inside Story continues right after this. Stick around.
6 ABC's Inside Story is presented by Temple University.